A generation ago, most households ran on a single income. Today, most run on two. On the surface, that should mean more safety, more total money coming in, more cushion against a bad month, more room to absorb an emergency. Researchers who studied this question, most notably Elizabeth Warren and Amelia Warren Tyagi in their 2003 book, The Two-Income Trap, looked at actual bankruptcy filing data and found something close to the opposite. Households with two incomes weren't just failing to get safer. In important ways, they'd become more financially fragile than single-income households a generation earlier. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how the second income gets absorbed before it ever becomes safety, why that mechanism makes things worse rather than better, and what to actually do about it if your household runs on two incomes right now. Part 1. The research that found the opposite. Warren and Tyagi's research compared family budgets and bankruptcy patterns across roughly one generation, broadly the 1970s versus the early 2000s, tracking what happened as households shifted from predominantly single income to predominantly dual income. The intuitive assumption is straightforward. A second income should mean a family has meaningfully more money than a comparable single-income family did before, and therefore more of a buffer when something goes wrong, a job loss, a medical bill, a divorce. What the bankruptcy data actually showed was that dual-income families were filing for bankruptcy and facing serious financial distress at rates that didn't fit that assumption at all. If two incomes simply meant more total cushion, this shouldn't have been happening at the rates the data showed. Something was absorbing the second income before it ever became a safety margin. And the research traced exactly what that something was. Part 2. The bidding war mechanism. Here's the mechanism, and it's more mundane and more structural than any individual bad decision. When a meaningful share of households shifted from one income to two at roughly the same time, families collectively had more money to spend on a specific category of goods, ones with limited supply, where the only way to get a better one is to outbid someone else for it. The clearest example is housing in a good school district. A house in a strong public school zone isn't like a TV. You can't simply manufacture more of the best school districts when demand rises. When most families in a market had one income, the going price for those homes reflected what families could afford on one income. As dual-income households became the norm, families bidding for the same limited set of good school district homes now had two incomes worth of borrowing power to bring to that bidding war. And so did everyone else competing for the same homes. The result wasn't that families got a meaningfully better home for the same share of income. It's that home prices in those specific limited supply areas rose to absorb roughly the additional income families now had available. Because that's what happens to the price of anything in fixed supply when more buyers show up with more money. The second income didn't become extra savings, it became the new going rate for the same competitive slot. The exact same dynamic shows up in a second category, things that became newly necessary specifically because of the shift to two incomes. Childcare for two working parents, a second car to get to a second job, and often a higher effective tax bracket on the combined income. None of these existed as costs for the equivalent one-income household a generation earlier because they didn't need to. Part 3. The real numbers behind the trap. The core finding from Warren and Tyagi's analysis was that when you account for the new fixed costs, the bid-up mortgage, childcare, the second car, taxes, a typical two-income family in the early 2000s had less discretionary income left over after fixed costs in inflation-adjusted terms than a typical one-income family did in the 1970s, despite the two-income family bringing in meaningfully more total money. This is the part that breaks the intuitive assumption from the hook. More total income, but a larger share of it was already spoken for the moment it arrived, committed to a mortgage payment, childcare, and a second car payment that didn't exist as required costs a generation earlier. The family wasn't poorer in absolute terms. They were more financially exposed because almost the entire second income had already been converted into a fixed monthly obligation rather than flexible savings. Part 4. Why this makes you more fragile, not less. This is the mechanism that actually matters for understanding the word trap. A one-income household from a generation earlier had something the modern dual-income household structurally doesn't: a non-working spouse who represented real, untapped earning capacity in an emergency. If the primary earner lost their job, the second adult in the household could, in principle, enter the workforce to provide a stopgap income while the family regrouped. That spare capacity functioned as a kind of informal insurance policy, even if it was never actually used. In a dual-income household where both incomes are already fully committed to fixed costs calculated assuming both incomes continue, that backup option is already gone before anything bad happens. If either earner loses their job, there's no spare earner left to call up. Both are already working, and the fixed costs were sized for two incomes from the start. The family isn't just down one income, they're down their entire reserve capacity simultaneously. Because the second income was never treated as a buffer, it was treated as baseline. This is precisely why two incomes can produce more financial fragility rather than less. The safety net that used to exist by default, an available second earner, became the default income itself, and nothing replaced it as the new safety net. Part 5. The exact framework to protect against this, given this mechanism, here's how to actually structure a two-income household to avoid the trap rather than fall into it. Size your fixed costs, mortgage or rent specifically, to what one income could plausibly cover, not what both incomes qualify you for. Mortgage lenders will typically approve a loan amount based on combined household income, but that's a measure of what you can technically afford with both incomes intact, not what's safe if one disappears. Treat the second income explicitly as the household's savings and investing engine, not as additional spending capacity. This doesn't require literally living on one paycheck for everyone, but it means consciously directing a meaningful share of the second income toward an emergency fund and long-term investing before it gets absorbed into a higher tier of discretionary lifestyle. Build your emergency fund specifically around the loss of either income, not a generic multiple of monthly expenses. Given that both incomes are now structurally necessary rather than one being a true backup, the emergency fund is doing the job that the spare earner used to do informally, which argues for sizing it toward the more conservative end of the ranges covered in earlier emergency fund discussions rather than the minimum. Be specifically cautious about bidding wars on positional goods, homes and sought after school districts being the clearest example, recognizing that paying significantly more for marginal improvement in a limited supply category is exactly the mechanism that absorbed the second income for an entire generation of households before yours. Part 6. What this doesn't mean. This isn't an argument that dual-income households are a mistake, or that one-income households are automatically safer in some general sense. Single-income households carry their own version of fragility, with zero income redundancy if that one earner is affected. The point is narrower. The second income only provides real safety if it's deliberately treated as a buffer, rather than automatically absorbed into fixed costs the way the historical pattern shows it tends to be. The trap isn't having two incomes, it's structuring your fixed costs as if both incomes are guaranteed forever. The second income was supposed to be the thing that made families safer. For a lot of households, the research shows it became the thing that got bid into housing prices and new fixed costs before it ever turned into safety, leaving families with more total income but less actual cushion and no spare earner left in reserve if something goes wrong. So here's the one action. This week, honestly calculate what your household's fixed costs would look like on just your larger single income alone. If the gap is uncomfortably large, that gap is exactly the size of the safety net you don't currently have. And exactly what the framework in Part 5 is designed to rebuild. If this changed how you think about your household's second income, subscribe. Next video breaks down exactly how to build that one income buffer step by step without requiring anyone to actually quit their job.